Good morning to you. Last time we are looking at the characteristics, and now we are going to be pushing up from the second chapter. And this second chapter is going to be looking at the Pan-Africanism. With the Pan-Africanism, we are looking at how Africans, continents, or African revived their culture, talk about regain their dignity, they lost independence, and the attachment or attain economic advancement. So when you look at Pan-Africanism, this one mainly refers to a strong attachment with all blacks have towards the African continents, talk about African culture, the African unity, independence. Then the other, it looks at, or it is an expression of a desire by all Africans to revive their culture, talk about to regain their dignity, the independence, talk about also economic advancement. We are going to be looking at Pan-Africanism. We are going to see where the movement started from, and therefore this movement originated in what we call North America, and we are trying to see that Western and the Western Indies, where the black Negroes they suffered greatly from forced labor. Talk about discrimination and torture, whereby we are seeing that the black intellectuals, for instance, we had W.E.D. Du that's one try to fight for the Africans who are trying to suffer within these camps where the black Negroes were located. Talk about William Henry, talk about George Piedmont, the pioneer of African or of Pan-Africanism movement or Pan-African movement. When we move on, we are going to look at the conference that was organized in 1900. It was in London, and therefore we see other conferences that were also later organized in different states. For instance, we had that one that organized in 1919. That was in Paris Conference, or what you can term as the Paris Conference. Then you had that one of 1921. That was the London Conference. Then also talk about the 1927 New York Conference, which all had been scheduled to meet Tunisia, but to flop due to the good will from Britain and France. All these movements, they were aiming now to regain the lost glory of African nations or countries in terms of reviving their culture, talk about regain their independence, dignity, and also attain what we call economic transformation. When we move on, we are going to be looking at the major objective of the formation of the Pan-African movement. The first point that we try usually to talk about is to unite all the black people living within Africa and others within the world. Here we are seeing that we had Africans that we are living in diaspora. All those Africans, this Pan-African movement was to unite all of them. And therefore we see that they had to come together and inspect of their different education levels, or despite of their different education levels, and also talk about their infinity. Then the other was to look at what we call the lost dignity of the black man in the entire world. With this dignity, we are seeing that this dignity had been lost due to what we call enslavement of the Africans due to the biased rating of the Europeans. Then talk about the abuse the abuse and the discrimination of the black man's violation was also another point. Another, it is to form a common black man's voice against the colonial rule in Africa was also a major reason. And then the other, it was to find meanings, talk about ways of developing African continents so that it could stop depending on the foreign economies or foreign countries. Then the other that you can also try to talk about that was also a major factor in there. We are trying to see that to find a meaning, the meaning I've talked about, then it is it aimed at reviving, talk about the African culture which had been undermined by the Europeans, and talk about also the missions, the Europeans. And then the other, it is establish a friendly so-called diplomatic relations with the Europeans within Europe, and without being enslaved to them. And then the other was to form what we call a strong and united voice of all blacks in relation to affairs of the world. And therefore, you are trying to see that different founders, for instance, that one that who formed the PAM. I'm talking about the Pan-African movement. I would listen to the black people with their views in different categories, depending to different groups of people. Then the other was to uplift the standards of living of Africans and the entire blacks within the world. They are saying that this was to be achieved by promoting what we call regional economic integration in Africa, and encouraging technical transfer, attracting all the capital from within into what we call African states. And then the other, it is to do what we call later, we are saying that they attain PAM, or it aimed to attain or to check the growing rate of neocolonialism within Africa. I remember telling you that when you talk about neocolonialism, we are talking about the indirect rule. Is another way of ruling people that is indirectly, that these colonialists try to use after when they had left many of the Europeans, many of the African countries. They came back with what we call the neocolonialism, or the indirect way of ruling these states. And then the other aim that we shall be looking at will be to train African leaders and equip them with the strong love, loyalty to the entire continent. Such leaders would help in the proper utilization of the African resources for the development purposes, or for the developmental purposes within all the nations. So those are some of the aims that we are trying to look at. But when we come back, we shall be looking at the reasons why Pan-Africanism had little impact on Africans before 1945. When we talk about 1945, we are talking about in the range when we had what we call the Second World War. By now, I beg to stop here, where we shall be picking up from next time.